Well, in this week's episode, I've got to tackle the cowl, and guess what? More bodywork. You're probably thinking that this bozo couldn't fix anything given all the time in the world, but the fact of the matter is we've got to fix all the damage and everything that happened to this thing and leave nothing out. And that means we got to fix the firewall, the holes that they put in there for one of those carbon monoxide killer manifold heaters. We've got to fix the cowl side where it looks like they ripped the cowl light arm off of it and screwed all that up. And then of course where they tore the body off the frame, they ripped the number one body mount hole all to pieces. So we've got to fix all of that stuff. We get into a little bit of riveting with the old waffle pattern. We make some rivets, and we also get to do, guess what? A little more lead work. Well, the mess that we started with, we've got to fix all this stuff on the firewall. So, holes filled, brackets put in place, more abuse, and more abuse. So first up, we've got to get these holes filled. It looks like this bottom one, they drilled up about 100 holes and popped the center of it out. I've got an extra hole here and an extra hole here. But the good news is that's about the extent of the damage, because all this stuff up here is supposed to be here. And then we got to fix this damage here where some bozo ripped this thing off the frame. So what I did is I went and got another piece, and I'm going to rob this thing right here out of here and reuse it. So the top hole is pretty easy to fix because they used a hole saw to saw that thing in there. These no doubt were for those manifold type heaters, and they fill the cabin with carbon monoxide if there's any kind of a leak, so they got to go, of course. First thing I like to do is get comfortable. So I lay the cowl over on the table, and I can just kind of go along and spot it in. And the idea is I'll weld a little bit, and then I'll hammer on it a little bit, and I want to keep my level of the two metals just perfectly in line. This is 16 gauge, so it's pretty easy to work. It's not really that hard to weld because of the warp factor is much less. But just keep checking it, making sure it's level. Then when I hammer weld it out, life is good. Well, the trick about this bottom hole fill is A, it's such an irregular shape, and B, it's got two bends in it. So I chose just to bend my piece with the one bend, then fit it up here, then go over and trim it on the Beverly shear, which is really nice, by the way. Look at how nice that does those curves. And then I'm going to go back over and I'm going to weld that piece in place, and then finally do the last bend in place. And then, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? More lead work. I mean, you could Bondo over this thing, it'd probably be just fine, but I'm just not much of a Bondo guy. If I can lead, why not? Lead is permanent, Bondo is not. Lead won't shrink, Bondo will. And when I say Bondo, it's kind of like saying Kleenex. It's just a word for plastic body fillers. And I have nothing against plastic body fillers. They're fine if used like they're supposed to be used. They're not meant to be filling dents and stuff like that. They were meant to just smooth up some irregularities. Well, okay, it's fine for that. But if we can lead, why not? And in this particular case, this is a little bit of a tough piece to lead in the fact that we've got that rib coming down there, we've got that cage nut sitting there, and it's awful difficult to get in there and file it off, but we'll conquer it. Well, here I am and just heating up the metal and heating up the lead. And if one gets too hot, like the metal is right now, then I go back and I heat more onto the lead and then put it on the metal. And I like to use every bit of the stick that I can, thus the vice grips. You got to put tallow on your paddle, otherwise your paddle will stick to the lead. So that's what I'm doing here. A little tallow on there, a little heat. Yes, it flows out beautifully. And you just keep working it and working it. And especially in this case, if you can work that as close to the shape that you want to get it, it really helps, because filing this thing off was a little bit of a bitch. A little shaping here, a little shaping there with the flat file. And then on this inside curve, I had to use a bowl nose file. It worked out brilliantly. And voila, it's a beautiful piece. Now, why would you want to use Bondo on there if you can use lead? Well, next up on our agenda is these lower number 1 body mount holes. Now, for me to get in here and do all this, I'm going to have to remove this toe board piece right here. Once I get that out of there, now I can bend the lower sill piece straight. So once I got that sill straight, I need to pull the well back together again. So, simple motorcycle strap, supported with a board down there in the bottom. Of course, a big hit with a 2-pound hammer. Nice. And then I think this thing could be welded back together again. Now the passenger side is just gone. So what I did is make a little piece to fill in down there at the bottom, remove that sill, the same one, the toe board sill, and then that bracket right there we're going to replace with one that I pulled off of a section that I bought up at Bert's Model A. So then once I got the bracket off of there, I spot welded it onto the lower sill and held it in place with those screws up top. But I had to modify some rivets, and so I turned the heads off to the right shape, but I still had to modify the length. And you really shouldn't cut them off with a cut-off wheel or get them hot, because it changes the metallurgy in them. So what I did is took that piece of brass, I tapped it half 20, and I put it the counterbore at the right length, so that when I screw this down tight, the rivet will just come out the end, and that's exactly how much I need to turn off. So there, it's just a simple process of inserting it into the lathe and tightening down the brass part, and then turn off the excess material. It worked out brilliantly. Now this is the cool waffle tool. I think you can buy these in any Model A parts stores. But that waffle pattern is what Ford used on all the rivets in the bodies. So with a little bucking bar there with Chuck in the background, it really does a beautiful job. We're getting a little bit long-winded in this video, so next time I'm going to fix the cowl panels. Looks like they ripped the cowl lights off of both sides. Yes, we make more rivets so I can put these brackets in so that they look exactly like original. I'm going to get that firewall radiator radius rod bracket riveted on, and the sub rails are going to go together. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to marry the tub, the doors, and the cowl section all together, and we're going to square up where this thing was racked to the passenger side.